The snow fell in heavy, silent sheets, blanketing the city in a cold, unbroken white. Streetlights glimmered through the flurries, casting fractured shadows on the deserted sidewalks. The world seemed paused, as though the storm had frozen time itself. Adrian Vallon, CEO of one of the largest corporations in the country, barely noticed the stillness around him. He was late, frustratingly late, for a board meeting that could determine the future of his empire. But in that moment, the storm seemed insignificant compared to the sudden pull of a small, trembling voice. "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night." He froze mid-step, his polished shoes crunching against the icy sidewalk. Turning, he saw a little girl standing there, alone in the snow, her coat too thin to protect her from the biting cold. Her wide, terrified eyes met his, and for a moment, he felt a pang deeper than any business worry had ever struck him. Snow clung to her dark hair and eyelashes, making her look like a fragile doll that could shatter with a single gust of wind. He knelt slowly, mindful of his movements, speaking with a calm he hoped would reach her. "Where's your mother?" She didn't come home," the girl whispered, her voice quivering. "And someone tried to take me." Adrian's chest tightened. The fear in her eyes was raw, unfiltered, and it struck him with an unexpected intensity. Without thinking, he reached out his hand. "I won't leave you," he promised. The little girl's name was Lena, and in that instant, she became the axis on which Adrian's world would pivot. He could have walked away, called the police, returned to the safety of his pristine office and predictable life, but he couldn't. Not now. Not when he saw the terror etched on her small face. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're safe with me." Her hands were tiny and cold as they grasped his. Her grip was desperate, as though she feared letting go might mean disappearing forever. Together, they navigated the storm, stepping carefully through the knee-high snowdrifts. The city seemed transformed, the usual hum of traffic replaced by the whisper of wind and the soft crunch of snow beneath their feet. Every shadow felt threatening, and every alley seemed to hold unseen danger. Adrian's mind raced with possibilities, but a singular thought anchored him: he would protect her, no matter what it cost. The underground parking lot beneath Valencorp HQ offered a brief sense of refuge. Its harsh fluorescent lights reflected off the polished concrete, washing the space in stark, artificial brightness. Adrian led Lena to his armored SUV, the doors closing with a reassuring thud. Inside, the warmth was immediate, and the threat of the cold world outside seemed to recede, though only slightly. Lena clutched his coat like a lifeline, burying her face into the fabric, and for a moment, Adrian simply held her, feeling the tremor of fear and trust intertwined. As they drove through the silent streets, he glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes, and her wide, dark eyes seemed to absorb everything with both curiosity and caution. "What happened?" he asked softly. "My mom, she's gone," Lena said. "Someone is looking for her, for us. I don't know where she is." Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. He had faced countless crises, boardroom battles, and public scandals, but nothing like this. Nothing that placed such raw responsibility on his shoulders. His life, which had always been structured, controlled, and predictable, had now been thrown into chaos by the trembling hand of a child. By the time they reached his penthouse, the city beneath them sparkled under the snowfall, skyscrapers glinting like frost-covered diamonds. Lena's mouth fell open as she stepped into the warm, expansive apartment. The space was luxurious, filled with light, soft carpets, and furniture that whispered of power and wealth, but none of it mattered to her. Her gaze was still searching, still wary, still afraid. Adrian led her to a guest room, but she refused to sleep alone. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered, clutching her small stuffed bear. "I'm right here," he assured her. He had no choice but to be honest. He would not abandon her, not when she needed him most. That night, they sat in the kitchen, sipping hot chocolate. The simple warmth of the mug seemed almost magical against the cold chaos of the world outside. Lena spoke hesitantly at first, telling him about her mother, Mara. Mara had been fleeing a dangerous man named Damien Crow, a man with far-reaching influence and a willingness to harm anyone who stood in his way. She had been meticulous, documenting every threat, every suspicion, every detail in a hidden notebook meant to guide her daughter should something go wrong. Adrian listened silently, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. Children should not know fear like this. They should not be forced to shoulder the burden of survival. And yet here was Lena, a tiny, trembling girl, carrying the knowledge and consequences of her mother's danger on her small shoulders. Morning broke over the city in a muted gold, filtering through the tall windows of the penthouse. Snowflakes clung to the edges of buildings, their slow descent reflecting the calm before a storm. Adrian stood at the balcony, staring out over the city, and allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He had built walls around himself for years, walls of control, of isolation, of power, but this small child, with her courage and her fear, was already chipping at them. "Sir," Lena's soft voice called from behind him, "you're awake." He turned, offering her a faint smile. "Shouldn't you be resting?" "I heard you on the phone last night," she said, eyes wide. "The name. Damien. That's him, right?" Adrian's heart clenched. Her eyes searched his, unwavering despite the shadow of fear in them. "Yes," he admitted. "That's the man your mother has been running from." Her small hand brushed against his arm. "Then, can we find her now?" He swallowed hard. "We will, but first, we need her notebook. It has all the clues, all the steps we need to stay ahead of him." The SUV ride to Lena's old neighborhood was tense, the snow thick and unrelenting. Adrian had arranged additional security, a convoy of vehicles keeping them protected from unseen eyes. Lena's grip on her bear was fierce, her small fingers knotted tightly around it as if it were the last tether to her safety. The house she led him to was narrow, crumbling, and half hidden by drifts of snow. Inside, the furniture was thinly layered with dust, and the walls bore faint cracks as though the structure itself had been holding its breath. Under the bed in Mara's old bedroom, a loose floorboard revealed a worn leather notebook filled with names, dates, sketches, and plans. Adrian realized with a jolt that some of the sketches depicted him, as seen through the lens of a frightened child, a protector she had never met but instinctively trusted. Suddenly, the front door slammed with a force that echoed through the small home. Shadows moved across the walls, long and menacing. Damien Crowe emerged, tall and broad, his icy eyes glinting in the dim light. "You found her," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Adrian stepped forward, shielding Mara and Lena. "Let her go," he demanded. Damien laughed, a chilling sound. "She belongs to me. Always has." "No," Adrian replied firmly, his voice unwavering. "She belongs to no one. And you will never hurt her again." The gun was raised, the air thick with tension. Adrian acted instinctively, moving Mara and Lena behind him as the first bullets shattered the windows. The fight was brutal and unrelenting, Damien's rage a physical force that met Adrian's precise defense. But Adrian's focus was unbroken. Every movement, every reaction, was calculated to protect the two most important lives in the room. Outside, sirens screamed through the snowy streets, announcing the arrival of the authorities. Damien's network crumbled around him, and he was taken into custody, his cold blue eyes flicking with disbelief and rage. Mara and Lena clung to each other, tears streaming down their faces as relief and exhaustion mingled. Adrian held Lena's hand firmly, offering silent comfort and reassurance. Weeks passed. Mara and Lena settled into a safer home, laughter slowly returning to their lives. Adrian became a constant presence, his protective nature softened by the bonds he was forming. Lena thrived, drawing cheerful pictures, her childhood slowly being reclaimed. Mara rebuilt her life, using her knowledge to protect others in danger, quietly supported by Adrian's resources. One snowy evening, Lena tugged Adrian outside. "Look! It's snowing," she exclaimed, spinning in the flakes. "Do you remember that night?" "Yes," he said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "You saved me," she said, her voice steady. "And you promised you'd never leave." "Always," Adrian said, his tone firm. "Then let's make a new promise," she whispered. "That we stay together. Always. No matter what," she said. "Yes," Adrian agreed. The snow fell softly around them, a blanket of peace rather than fear. Adrian realized that wealth and power were insignificant compared to the trust, loyalty, and love of those who chose to stay by your side. The storm was over, and a new beginning had begun, a life filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet strength of a chosen family. Some lessons are learned only in the darkest nights. Courage is not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. Family is not always blood, but those who choose to stay, and sometimes, the smallest hands can guide the strongest hearts to what truly matters. The following morning, the penthouse was filled with a fragile quiet, broken only by the soft ticking of the antique clock Adrian had inherited from his grandfather. Lena slept peacefully in the guest room, curled up with her bear, while Mara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the worn leather of the notebook. Her eyes were haunted yet determined, scanning the pages filled with coded notes, names, dates, and sketches of individuals who could either help or harm them. Adrian stood near the window, arms crossed, the city below glinting in a thin layer of frost. Snow still clung stubbornly to the streets, making it difficult to detect movement below. He had been awake most of the night, analyzing every piece of information Mara had painstakingly collected. Damien Crowe wasn't just a dangerous man, he was meticulous, patient, and had eyes everywhere. Every step they took needed to be calculated, every decision precise. "Are you sure he won't come after us here?" Mara asked softly, glancing at Adrian. Her voice carried both fear and defiance. Adrian turned to face her, his expression firm. "He might try. But this place is secure. Security systems, armored doors, private guards, he won't get past them without us knowing." Mara exhaled slowly, relief mixing with anxiety. She looked down at Lena, still sleeping peacefully. "I've been running for years, Adrian. I thought I could protect her, but I was wrong. I never imagined the lengths he would go to find us." Adrian stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone anymore. I'll make sure she's safe. Both of you." They spent the morning planning, cross-referencing the notebook with public records, flight manifests, and financial transactions. Every detail Mara had painstakingly hidden was now a puzzle they could piece together to anticipate Damien's next move. Adrian's mind raced, not with the concern of corporate deals, but with the pressing need to protect two lives. Hours later, the sound of a car crunching through snow outside the penthouse alerted them. Adrian's security team sprang into action. Mara and Lena exchanged a frightened glance. The SUV pulled up, black and imposing, blending seamlessly into the shadows. Adrian motioned for them to stay calm and ushered them into the secure part of the apartment. Through the surveillance monitors, he saw Damien's men, faceless and menacing, scanning the perimeter. They hadn't expected the countermeasures, they thought his usual intimidation and reach would be enough, but Adrian had anticipated them. Every exit route had cameras, and his team tracked every movement. "They're not just looking for us, they're testing," Adrian said, voice low. "Damien wants to know how much we're willing to risk." Mara nodded, clutching the notebook tightly. "Then we need to be smarter than them. We can't just run forever." The afternoon passed with tense strategizing. Maps were spread across the dining table, showing escape routes, safe houses, and locations where Damien's influence might reach. Adrian emphasized mobility, suggesting constant relocation until they could secure concrete evidence to bring Damien down legally. Lena, curious and brave despite her age, sat quietly beside her mother, peering at the maps. "Will we be okay?" she asked, her voice soft, betraying the anxiety she tried to hide. Adrian smiled faintly, though his jaw remained tight. "We will. But you need to trust us, both of us. We're your family now." The first real confrontation came that night. Damien's men tried to force entry at a decoy location Adrian had set up, a small apartment on the edge of the city. Sirens wailed as the police, tipped off by Adrian's prearranged alerts, intercepted the attackers. The skirmish was brief but violent, shouts, gunfire, and the metallic smell of snow-stained blood filled the air. Adrian stayed in constant contact with Mara and Lena through encrypted devices, ensuring they were never alone. Afterward, Mara hugged her daughter tightly. "We're still here," she whispered. "We're safe, for now." Adrian watched them, thinking about the first night they had met. How a small, frightened voice had pulled him into a life he hadn't expected, a life where responsibility wasn't measured in profit margins but in the fragility of trust and human connection. The little girl had changed him, had forced him to care in ways he never had before. Days turned into weeks as the chase escalated. Damien, frustrated by the inability to locate his targets, intensified his surveillance. Adrian countered each move with calculated precision. He set decoy routines, altered travel plans, and coordinated with law enforcement under strict confidentiality. Mara, meanwhile, began to document every interaction, building a case not just to protect herself and Lena, but to dismantle Damien's network entirely. The night of the climactic confrontation came unexpectedly. A snowstorm had enveloped the city, reducing visibility to mere meters. Damien, desperate and enraged, tried a direct approach, sending 2 vehicles to intercept Adrian's convoy. Adrian's tactical mind swung into action. He instructed his team to lead Damien's men into a controlled path, while he, Mara, and Lena navigated through a hidden service tunnel beneath the city streets. Inside the tunnel, the air was damp and echoing. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the low hum of electrical wiring added to the tension. Lena held tightly to Mara's hand, the stuffed bear tucked under her arm. Adrian walked ahead, scanning every shadow, every sound. He could feel the danger coiling around them like a living thing. Suddenly, Damien himself appeared at the end of the tunnel, blocking the exit. His icy gaze met Adrian's. "Thought you could hide from me," he sneered. Adrian stepped forward, protective instinct surging. "You'll go no further. Not tonight. Not ever." The confrontation was brutal. Damien lunged, and a violent struggle ensued. Bullets ricocheted against the walls. Adrian moved with precision, using his strength and quick thinking to shield Mara and Lena while neutralizing Damien's attacks. The fight was chaotic, the storm above reflecting the turbulence below. Every moment counted, one wrong move could cost a life. At the climax, Damien's weapon clattered across the floor. Adrian, breathing heavily, pinned him down. "It's over," he said, his voice steady but filled with the raw intensity of the fight. Sirens grew louder as law enforcement closed in, ready to take Damien and his accomplices into custody. Mara and Lena clung to each other, tears flowing freely. The weight of weeks of fear, uncertainty, and terror finally lifted, replaced by relief, safety, and the slow bloom of hope. Adrian knelt beside Lena, holding her small hand in his. "We're safe now," he whispered. The snow had finally begun to soften, the heavy flurries of the past days giving way to a delicate, sparkling dusting that clung to rooftops and tree branches. The city, once muted under the storm, seemed to breathe again, and for the first time in weeks, Adrian allowed himself a moment to exhale. Mara and Lena had settled into a new home, chosen not for its luxury, but for its security and warmth. The house was modest, tucked behind a row of tall oaks whose branches formed a natural barrier against prying eyes. Inside, the air smelled of pine and fresh-baked bread. Mara had insisted on cooking again, reclaiming the small domestic rituals that had once seemed so ordinary and now felt like acts of defiance against the fear that had dominated their lives. Adrian watched them from the kitchen doorway as Mara stirred a pot of soup, humming softly, and Lena arranged a row of stuffed animals along the windowsill, pretending they were soldiers guarding the house. The little girl had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The fear in her eyes, once sharp and immediate, was now tempered by cautious curiosity. Her laughter, small and brittle at first, had begun to bloom into something more confident, more unrestrained. He knelt beside her as she balanced a toy soldier on the edge of the sill. "Will they be safe?" she asked, her voice careful, almost testing. "They will," he replied. "Because you're brave, and because we look out for each other now." Lena's eyes sparkled, a flicker of pride and trust. "Just like a real family," she said. "Yes," Adrian agreed softly. "A real family." Mara's gaze met his from across the room. In that quiet glance, no words were needed, gratitude, relief, and something deeper, something unspoken, passed between them. Adrian realized that the bond they had formed was no longer defined by circumstance or obligation, it was forged in the fires of fear, trust, and survival. The following days were devoted to rebuilding not only their physical lives but their emotional ones. Mara began to document Damien Crow's crimes in meticulous detail, preparing evidence that would ensure he could never threaten them, or anyone else, again. Adrian assisted her, his legal resources and investigative skills combining with her first-hand accounts to create an airtight dossier. During this time, Lena attended a small local school. The first day was a careful balance of excitement and trepidation. She held Adrian's hand tightly as they walked through the gates, the crisp morning air carrying the faint scent of snow and hope. "You'll be okay," Adrian said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Just be yourself." Lena nodded, though her grip lingered a moment longer before she released it. "I will," she promised. Inside the classroom, she found a quiet corner and set down her backpack. The teacher, a kind woman with soft brown eyes, welcomed her warmly. For the first time in months, Lena felt the faint stirrings of normalcy. Meanwhile, Damien's arrest had created ripples throughout the city. His criminal network, once a shadowy presence capable of instilling fear, was rapidly dismantled. Adrian had coordinated closely with law enforcement, ensuring that every loose end was tied. But even as justice moved forward, he remained vigilant. He knew the threat could manifest in unexpected ways. Paranoia lingered, but it was tempered now by preparation and resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Adrian found Mara on the balcony, staring out over the city. "Thinking about what's next?" he asked softly. Mara's lips curved in a tired smile. "Not just what's next, but what we've been through. And what it's taught me." Adrian joined her, his hands resting lightly on the railing. "And what have you learned?" he asked, curious. "That courage isn't about fighting alone," she said quietly. "It's about knowing who will stand beside you. And sometimes, it comes from the most unexpected places, like a stranger who becomes a protector, or a child who becomes your anchor." Adrian considered her words, feeling their weight and truth. He had been a man of control, of calculation, of walls built to keep others at a distance. Lena had changed that. Mara had changed that. Fear had introduced him to empathy, responsibility, and love in its most raw and unguarded form. As winter deepened, the small household found its rhythm. Lena developed routines, her curiosity and energy spilling over into daily adventures, both mundane and magical. They would play board games by the fire, build snow forts in the backyard, and even create scavenger hunts to make lessons about safety and awareness engaging for the young girl. Adrian and Mara shared quiet moments, sometimes in companionable silence, sometimes in deep conversation about their fears, hopes, and the life they wanted to build together. One night, after Lena had fallen asleep, Mara lingered in the kitchen, reviewing the notebook one last time. She traced her fingers over the handwriting, the sketches, the detailed notes of the threats they had faced. Adrian approached quietly, watching her for a moment before speaking. "You've done so much," he said softly. "I had to," she replied. "For her. And, for me, too, I suppose." Adrian nodded. "And now? What will you do?" Mara smiled faintly. "Now. I live. I teach. I protect. And I hope. That's all I can do." Weeks later, the city experienced its first major snow melt. The streets glistened with rain-slicked patches, and the sun reflected off puddles that formed small, sparkling rivers along the curbs. Adrian, Mara, and Lena took a long walk together, their breaths visible in the crisp air. Lena skipped ahead, pointing out patterns in the frost, while Adrian and Mara walked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing. "You know," Mara said after a pause, "I used to think that life was about control, money, status, power. But now I know it's about connection. It's about who you choose to trust, and who chooses to stay when the storm hits." Adrian looked down at her, a rare, full smile touching his lips. "And some connections come from the most unexpected moments. The smallest hands can change the largest hearts." Lena ran back to them, cheeks flushed and eyes alight. "Come on. Let's build a snowman," she shouted. Adrian and Mara exchanged a look, laughter bubbling up as they followed her into the soft snow. Together, they built a snowman, giving it a crooked smile and a scarf that Mara had knitted. Lena clapped her gloved hands, delighted, as Adrian added the finishing touches. As they stood back to admire their creation, the wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of pine and winter air. Adrian felt a profound sense of peace, a sensation foreign to him but deeply cherished. They had survived fear, threats, and uncertainty. They had fought and survived together. And in that survival, they had found something more precious than safety or victory. They had found trust. They had found love. They had found family. The snow fell gently that evening, soft and persistent, covering the city in a blanket of white. Adrian watched Lena's laughter echo across the yard, felt Mara's hand squeeze his lightly, and realized that life, no matter how unpredictable or dangerous, had given them a second chance. A chance to heal, to grow, to live fully and fearlessly. Some lessons are carved not in comfort, but in trial. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Trust is not built in ease, but in adversity, and family is not always determined by blood, but by those who choose to stay. Adrian knelt in the snow beside Lena, brushing a clump of powder from her coat. Always, he whispered, echoing the promise they had made on the first snowy night when their lives had irrevocably changed. Yes, Lena said, her small voice firm. Always. Mara stood behind them, watching, her eyes soft with tears of relief and hope. Always, she echoed, and together, they watched as the city beneath them glimmered in the quiet beauty of a winter evening, the storm finally behind them, and the promise of a new beginning stretching endlessly before them. Damien Crowe had once been a man of charm and ambition, rising through the criminal underworld with a cunning that left many in awe and terror. His empire wasn't built solely on brute force, it was a web of manipulation, silent threats, and carefully constructed loyalties. He had learned early in life that power demanded control, that fear could be a weapon sharper than any blade. But Damien's obsession with Mara had been personal, born from a mixture of envy, desire, and the belief that he could own what others could not. Adrian learned about Damien's past through surveillance reports and intercepted communications, piecing together the motives that had turned him into a relentless predator. Damien had a history of tracking women who had escaped his influence, and Mara's defiance had made her his most coveted target. Each attempt he made was a calculated step, designed to test defenses, manipulate emotions, and strike fear deep into those who defied him. Understanding Damien was the first step in dismantling him. Adrian spent hours reviewing the dossiers, coordinating with law enforcement, and creating contingency plans. Mara, meanwhile, turned her trauma into a tool of resilience. She traced patterns in Damien's operations, connecting seemingly unrelated events, and identifying weaknesses in his network. Every discovery empowered her, and every plan made strengthened the bond between the three of them, Adrian, Mara, and Lena. Even as safety improved, tension lingered. Minor threats continued, anonymous calls, fleeting shadows outside windows, and the occasional warning message from Damien's loyalists. But each challenge was met with preparation and unity. Adrian taught Lena the importance of awareness without instilling fear, showing her that vigilance was a strength, not a burden. Mara instilled in her daughter courage through stories of survival and resilience, emphasizing that true bravery was standing firm despite fear. One particularly bitter night, when snow fell thick and fast, Adrian's alert systems indicated movement near the perimeter. Damien's men were scouting, testing defenses once again. Adrian and his team mobilized swiftly, ensuring Mara and Lena were secure. Adrian watched the monitors with cold precision, noting each movement and adjusting positions. "You're incredible at this," Mara whispered, watching him coordinate with his team. Adrian gave a small smile, though his eyes never left the screens. "Experience," he said simply. "And a very good reason to protect what matters." That night, after the threat had passed, Mara and Adrian sat in the quiet living room. The snowstorm outside created an otherworldly stillness, the muffled wind like a lullaby over the city. "Do you think it will ever truly end?" Mara asked, her voice soft, almost lost in the hum of the heaters. Adrian considered her question. "It ended the day we stopped him. Anything else is just cleaning up the shadows he left behind." Mara nodded, letting herself believe it. Lena peeked out from the hallway, her small eyes shining. "Can we go outside?" she asked. The snow looks magical. Adrian laughed softly. Of course. Let's make it magical. Outside, the world had transformed. Snow blanketed the rooftops, streets, and trees. Streetlights reflected off the white surface, creating a soft, almost dreamlike glow. Lena ran ahead, squealing with delight, making snow angels and throwing powdery handfuls into the air. Adrian and Mara followed, their laughter mixing with hers, carrying across the quiet neighborhood. In the midst of the snow-covered yard, Adrian felt a profound sense of completion, not in conquest or wealth, but in survival, trust, and love. This family, unconventional and unexpected, had faced storms together, both literal and figurative, and emerged stronger. The fear that had once consumed them was replaced with a deliberate, conscious joy, the kind that comes after knowing what true peril is and surviving it together. As they built a snowman together, Adrian watched Mara's hands move deftly, shaping snow into a familiar, smiling figure. Lena decorated it with a small scarf and stick arms, her imagination running wild. Adrian knelt beside her, brushing snow from her coat and hair. Do you remember the first night we met? He asked softly. Lena nodded, her eyes reflecting the golden glow of the streetlights. I was scared, she admitted. And now? He asked. Now. I'm happy, she said simply, her words carrying the weight of resilience and hope. Mara joined them, wrapping her arm around Adrian's shoulder. We survived, she said. And we will continue to. Together. Adrian felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the fire pit crackling nearby. He realized that the essence of family, courage, and love had little to do with the predictable comforts of life. It had everything to do with standing firm in the face of fear, protecting one another, and choosing trust every day. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Adrian continued his work as CEO but balanced it with devotion to Mara and Lena. Mara resumed her teaching, dedicating herself to helping children understand courage and self-reliance. Lena thrived, her laughter echoing through their new home, a constant reminder of the miracle of survival and the beauty of trust. Even Damien, now securely imprisoned, could not undo the bonds that had been forged in the snow and shadows. His attempts to intimidate or manipulate had failed, leaving only memories of fear that had been transformed into lessons of resilience. Mara and Adrian took every precaution to ensure he could never harm them again, but they did so without obsession, choosing instead to live fully in the moment they had reclaimed. One evening, months after the storm, they sat together by the fireplace, sipping hot chocolate. Lena had fallen asleep beside Mara, her head resting on her mother's lap. Adrian and Mara exchanged a glance, one filled with quiet understanding and gratitude. You know, Mara said, breaking the silence, I used to think happiness was something you could plan or control. But now I see it's found in moments like this, simple, quiet, and shared. Adrian nodded. And in the people who choose to stay, even when life is unpredictable and dangerous. Mara leaned against him, and for the first time, Adrian allowed himself to fully feel the depth of his own transformation. He had been a man of power, control, and solitude. Now, he was a man who understood love, family, and the courage it takes to trust others with your life. Lena stirred in her sleep, murmuring a small, happy word. Adrian smiled, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. Always, he whispered. Yes, Mara echoed softly. And together, they watched the flames dance in the fireplace, snow still drifting gently outside, a world transformed, a storm behind them, and a future that promised hope, safety, and enduring love. In the quiet that followed, Adrian reflected on the lessons learned through the fear, the danger, and the unexpected paths life had presented. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act in spite of it. Trust is not a guarantee, it is a choice made every day, in both the smallest and the greatest moments. And family is not always defined by blood, but by those who choose to remain when the world turns harsh and unforgiving. As the night deepened and the snow settled into a soft silence, the three of them slept, wrapped not only in blankets but in the certainty that they were together, protected, and stronger than any storm that might come again. And in the glow of the hearth, Adrian finally understood, the greatest victories in life are not won in boardrooms, battles, or wealth, they are won in trust, courage, and the quiet, enduring bonds of love. The city outside, once cloaked in fear and uncertainty, now sparkled under the moonlight. And within their home, warmth, laughter, and the deep, unwavering strength of family promised a future not of fear, but of hope.